Dream Pools, a short story written by me from summer of 2024 up until winter of 2024. I don't think she noticed me. There's no way she noticed me. I hope she didn't notice me. My fist crammed the roses into the dumpster and I hid from sight. What was I thinking? There's no way this could ever go well for me. How could I have conceived such a stupid thought within my microscopic brain? I decided to run. I slipped around the corner of the diner, out of the alleyway and past the front of the shops in town. Boot hit muck and splashed up torrents of murky water as I fled through muddy alleyways, being assaulted by wind and rain. The weather was anything but hospitable, and yet I desperately needed out, to escape. I was a fool to place myself within the league of her radiantness and divine form. I fell for her so deeply that my judgment became more obscured than the street below these foggy brown puddles growing in the potholes. We'd been talking for a while now, but the idea of us ever getting together was so outlandish. There was no way some bottom feeder such as myself could score such a perfect rose. As I ran, tearing through the streets, barely managing to stay upright as my grip on the sidewalks was sabotaged by the puddles amassing, people called out for me to watch where I was going. "Slow down there! Hey, watch it! You almost ran into me!" Even the freakish waitress at the steakhouse with white hair at much too young an age had a "careful running in the rain" to send my way. This didn't matter. I was barely paying attention. What was important is getting out of there, as far away from my pipe dream of a crush as possible. The rain beat down on my outside as my emotions beat on my inside. The forces tore at me as I slid through the damp streets, seething at my inability to do anything. How could I even get it into my head that I'm worthy of someone so far above me? She was smarter than me, more attractive than me, more popular than me. She likely only found herself as a friend to me out of pity at my loneliness. Just because we sit next to each other and talk a bit in college class doesn't mean anything. Why would it be otherwise? We barely have anything in common, and I've only really hung out a few times. Thunder crackled through the sky as if the heavens above had felt the need to let out a malevolent snicker. I rounded a corner only to slip and fall through the water, my mind slipping as well and my eyes going dark. I'd passed out in the streets. Great, I'd already fumbled with the crush I'd been so passionate about for years. Then to hammer in the pain, I'd hit my head on the sidewalk hard enough to pass out. And as it all faded to black, the thunder and rain were replaced by the blast of several trumpets, a terrifying harmony joined by 1,000 angelic choirs, ringing throughout my ears and pounding my skull. And then their calls went silent. And then I felt. And after that, I heard a warm voice call out with such hospitality and compassion that it could be confused for a parent tending to a child. "Looks like you had a nasty fall. Need some help?" An outstretched hand linked to the muscular body of a man concealed only by white angelic scraps of cloth reached out to pull me away from the mud I'd slipped in, his face bearing a friendly smile. Wrapped around his mighty stature over his shoulder was a powerful horn of shiny polished brass, and atop his head was a golden crown pressed into the shape of a tower, with the top of this tower notably incomplete, bricks missing and half of it bearing more layers than the other. I placed my hand within his and he raised me to my feet, then shook my hand with an iron grip, powerful yet friendly. "Hello, traveler. My name is King Nimrod," he declared in a hearty tone, while continuing to shake my hand with such power that my boots leapt up from the ground. "I am the mighty hunter that watches over this pristine land." Nimrod outstretched his arm to direct my vision to the beautiful environment crawling out to distant horizons. The sight of lush green jungles of mighty trees, the sounds of exotic birds, and the rushing of waterfalls flooded my senses. The fresh, crisp air filled my lungs with a rejuvenating spirit. I stood in silence, taking in the bliss and serenity of the beautiful environment, my mouth agape and my eyes slowly scanning across the landscape. Nimrod let out a mighty chuckle, one of power but with an edge of kindness. He reminded me of my grandfather. "Well, you got a name, my boy?" he asked. It just occurred to me that I'd been so busy playing charades as a dead fish towards the skyline of lush trees that I hadn't even let out a single word towards my new companion. I go by my last name, Watson, I responded. I'd gone by my last name all my life, as my first was a name people misspelled when heard and mispronounced when written. It was a name I was ashamed and embarrassed of, providing my exigence for simply telling people to refer to me by my last name. Watson was simple, but not common, a memorable name that would prove easy to match to my face. Well, what's wrong with your first name? Nimrod asked. What is your first name? I looked away for a moment, clicking my tongue while lost in thought. I hated to tell my real name to strangers. They'd always comment on the origins of the name. And let me tell you, if I were paid every time someone made the same jokes about my name, I'd bankrupt small nations. But if I got paid every time the jokes were funny, I'd have never seen a dime. I don't like to talk about it. I only tell people I trust, I quickly answered. Nimrod clicked his tongue, then replied, I can respect your decision. After all, we've only just met. But perhaps you'd like to go hunting with me? I thought it over, then agreed. Sure thing, but I've never really gone hunting before. Nimrod chuckled, then gestured for me to follow him into the forest. We'll get supplies at my camp. I have a spare bow you can use. It shouldn't be too difficult to teach you. We stood in a clearing of the woods, soft grass flowing in the breeze, and the leaves of the trees following that dance of the wind. Nimrod shifted my grip on the bow, modifying the positions of my hands, explaining how to properly hold the weapon for the most effective shot. And you're right-handed, correct? Nimrod asked, reassuring himself of information he was already quite certain of. Mark of a man who is confident but humble, allowing himself to appear unsure despite knowing for a fact that he is correct. After all, he had already positioned my hands in the optimal posture for firing a bow as a right-handed individual, which would have been futile had he not already known I was right-handed, showing how he had full knowledge of which of my hands was dominant, yet making himself appear relatable and imperfect by pretending that he cannot remember. Truly incredible. I nodded. Yup, the hand I sign all of my papers with. Nimrod pulled out his own bow, positioning an arrow on the bowstring, showing me how to aim as the arrow is drawn back before he fired it off into a rotten old oak tree, the arrow piercing through the decaying ancient wood. The oak was a sad sight, a miserable little stump with a hollow interior, filled to the brim with insects and fungus, the brittle wooden walls forming the shape of a round tower, windows carved through it by various insects and the forces of nature rotting away the tower's walls. Nimrod looked to me and gestured towards the stump of that old hag of an oak. Go ahead, give it a shot. I released my arrow, managing to miss the stump by only a few inches, my shot falling into the ground without a sound. Nimrod plucked it from the earth and handed me back my arrow. Give it another go. I pulled back the bowstring as far as I could, aiming my arrow directly to the base of the stump, lining it up as best as I could, and then released it, watching as the arrow arced right into the decaying remains of the oak, thunking right into it and knocking through the brittle bark, desecrating a few fungi within. Nimrod cheered. That's it, my friend! What a shot! He exclaimed with pride as he retrieved the arrow, examining the damage the shot had done. Now, he began, I believe we are ready to begin hunting animals. It won't be easy, as your target can move now, and we will have to be as quiet as possible when approaching it. I nodded with excitement, taking back my arrow, Nimrod returning his own arrow to the quiver over his shoulder. Well then, let us find our first game, he beamed. My finger pulled back the string of the bow, the arrow aimed directly above the body of the deer, ensuring that the arc of the projectile would not cause it to miss. And I released it, letting it soar through the air. The arrow sliced through the deer's shoulder, immobilizing it with a single strike, the beast falling to the forest floor, kicking in confusion and pain, watching with terror as we approached it. Nimrod unsheathed a blade, handing it to me. You have to put the poor thing out of its misery. Oh, it was like this. I had no idea. I thought that simply hitting it with an arrow would kill it, and that afterwards we could cook the game for its delicious meat. I was unaware that one arrow almost never did the trick, that it was oftentimes necessary to finish off the animal with a blade. Stab it through the eye to minimize its pain, Nimrod explained. If it dies quickly, it won't have to suffer as long. Such a kind thought to feel towards something one had just caused the death of, allowing it to suffer for as short a period of time as possible to ensure that no unnecessary pain was caused, despite being the one that caused that pain to begin with. And was it necessary to cause the original pain, despite labeling it unnecessary to cause any additional pain? Why minimize the suffering if you're taking its life to begin with? I stabbed through its eye, the deer's last movements coming to a rest as the blade pierced into its brain. I looked to Nimrod, hollowness in my eyes. If it will be dead soon regardless, why do we ensure that its death is with as little pain as we can manage? Why choose this moral middle ground when we could either kill it apathetically or let it live? Nimrod crossed his arms. But of course, he explained, what separates the noble hunter from the mindless animal is that despite us executing game for the thrill of the hunt, we do so with grace and integrity, and ensure we do not torture, but simply kill in as usual and clean a way as possible. He cleared his throat before continuing. The lion cares not to deliver the gazelle to death's arms gracefully, and leaves it maimed and desecrated, causing death not by destroying its mind, but by destroying its body, leaving the mind to fear the death for that much longer than it would have been able to if the mind had simply been destroyed first. However, now that the mind has been destroyed, we may freely consume the body, for life has already left it, and to eat it would now cause no pain. This is the difference between the gentleman's sport and the beast's cruelty. It was sound logic to me. The difference between hunting for sport and heartlessly killing was the respect you showed to your prey. The difference between letting it die with the swift destruction of that part of it which processed what it was feeling, or letting it die with nothing but pain in the hours leading up to the loss of its blood taking it. And as my teeth sank into the venison, gently roasted by the fire, I pondered this. The hunt. The transformation of the brutal cruelty of nature's ways into a distinguished gentleman's game. I slept on the silky grass, just as Nimrod did each day of his life, and gazed upon the millions of beady white eyes in the sky, observing their blinking and their playful stares. I slipped backward into a deep slumber, hearing the crickets of the world around me die down as it all crumbled away into inky, shadowy darkness. I woke up, leaning against a drab building sitting in an alleyway. My clothes were filthy and covered in muck. Ugh. Figured at the time that I must have crashed out on the sidewalk. Had simply passed out in the middle of town, imagining the entire hunting trip of Nimrod. That was until I'd found the dagger Nimrod had given me, sitting right in my pocket, a sewn leather sheath around its sharp blade. It was proof, solid, concrete evidence that what I had experienced was real. I had fallen through a puddle that took me to another world, a wonderful place with the kind King Nimrod, who showed me the art of hunting and let me borrow his skills to take down with ease the game that had wandered before us. Was that it, then? The end of my time in that land? Certainly not. While the puddles stopped taking me there now, I figured that it was fresh, new puddles that allowed me to cross between our world and Nimrod's, to pass between the dull and the splendid, the misery and the bliss. There was nothing for me here anymore. My college classes were pointless now. I didn't need a career or money. When I was hungry, I could go to that land and partake in the hunt. And Marionette? Well, I hardly needed her now. What good was fantasizing about a woman's tender embrace when she was so unobtainable? No, all that mattered was the hunt. Or, that's what I told myself. While I was indeed eager to return, that didn't stop me from thinking about her. And then it hit me. Nimrod was a very wise man, and was intelligent enough to help me hunt deer with a bow and arrow in mere hours. So, logically, a man of this wisdom could help me better myself to become even close to worthy of her love? No, I couldn't. It would be so pathetic. I wandered through town, thinking about what had unfolded the previous day as I made my way home. It looked like the alleyway I'd been dropped into was one right by the diner Marionette worked for. Figures. Luckily for me, however, she didn't start work till hours later into the day, giving me the freedom to walk home without humiliation. I walked past the steakhouse, the waitress standing out front, around 15 minutes before the place even opened. In one hand she swept with a broom, and in the other she swept messy white strands of hair out of her pale, young face. I held my hands in my pockets and asked her, "What are you doing out here sweeping? I thought you were the waitress for this place." She shrugged, looking to me with her otherworldly red eyes. She had this strange look of bright red eyes, vampiric pale skin, and curly white hair. It was a complexion that left her mysteriously gorgeous to some, while coming off as odd and terrifying to others. She'd also memorized the names and faces of everyone in this town, as well as their preferred way of ordering steak. Just offered to do it for some extra pay. "Anyways, how are you, Watson, man of well-done steaks?" she replied, before adding, "The coward's order, if you get what I mean." I rolled my eyes before answering, "I'm fine. Yesterday was a great day for me, in fact. I went on a hunting trip." She eyed me suspiciously. "Uh-huh," she began. "And what about the other day, when you were running around like a madman in the rain?" Crossed my arms, glaring at her. Said I'm fine, and I don't need to elaborate on or explain anything. She held her hands up. "It's fine, dude. It was just a question." Whatever. I was more determined than ever to get back to that place. And all I needed to wait for was a little bit of rain. I sat on the ground by Nimrod, watching the sun gently rise from the tree line, illuminating the birds as they took flight, and all of the creatures darting between the clearings in the forest. "You never told me your first name," he told me, tossing a stone to the forest. "I'd say we're fine enough friends for you to reveal it to me." I thought for a moment, sighing. "It's Ulysses." Nimrod shrugged. "A fine enough name as any. I see no embarrassment to be had with it." I chuckled a bit. "It's an alright name until after the 100th person mispronounces it, or until you have someone throwing a few dozen Trojan War jokes at your face." Nimrod bit his cheek and tossed another stone before replying, "I lack the context of what exactly the Trojan War is. Suppose Ulysses must be the name of some commander from this war. Your parents named you this way to honor that man? Perhaps the people of your society no longer value brave warriors much." "Not exactly," I began. "The story of Ulysses is one of fiction, from a book known as the Odyssey. And in particular, the jokes center on a wooden horse, though it's only briefly mentioned in the Odyssey, being much more relevant to the plot of the Aeneid. The Odyssey is a story from a collection we call the Greek mythology." Nimrod pondered this, nodding as I explained the meaning behind my name. I continued. "The Trojan horse was a large wooden horse built during the plot of the Odyssey by the great warrior Odysseus, who is also referred to as Ulysses in Roman mythology. This horse was given to Troy as a gift. When they took it within their walls, many Greek soldiers poured out, slaughtering the Trojans." Nimrod began. "What a fascinating story." I shrugged, looking back to the golden sunrise. Nimrod continued. "Well, I believe there to be nothing problematic about such a name. You ought to wear it with pride. I mean, the last man to come here told me that my name is now an insult used for a fool. Yet I bear no misery over this. It's funny, even, that a name once meaning great hunter has gotten such low acknowledgement. You should stand proud that your name is at least still used to refer to such an honorable man." "You had a point." "You know," Nimrod continued, "ever since you arrived, I could tell that something is on your mind. You seem distant sometimes." I looked to the ground in shame. Yeah, there's this girl I know from the college I attend, and I like her a whole lot, but I'm scared she won't feel the same way. And if you're friends with someone, asking them out can be a real terrifying thing to do. Because what if she turns me down? Then our friendship is ruined and it all becomes awkward. It's a big risk, and it's just not one I have the guts to make. Nimrod smirked. Don't have the guts to take a woman's hand in marriage? I sighed. Well, yeah, it's just tough for me, you know? Nimrod laughed, patting my back. Well, if that's the case, you're gonna have to work on building your confidence. Let me tell you, my friend, nothing will have you feeling more bold and fearless than the exhilaration of the hunt. Now, where did I put my bow? I've begun to dread the days when it doesn't rain, and I have to stay in my own world. It isn't enough that I simply feel lonely without my most cherished companion and the exhilaration of hunting and fishing. I feel watched. I had no idea from what direction. When I turned around, it was just myself in an empty home. The shadows of the walls were still, and the halls just as long as they'd always been. The doors still led to the same rooms they always have, and the lights still all turned on with the flick of a switch. And perhaps I would be sleeping while those lights remained awake. It was hard to sleep that night. Something in the air was oppressing me, and the stars in the sky felt a bit more malicious than before. Why did they hate me? I was roused by a text from my phone. An oddity, for it was rare that anyone contacted me, seeing as how I rarely shared my number. What? The text was cryptic and ominous, written as a form of biblical warning, reading, Both us and him, demon of Babylon, the king's pact binds. Obey not the call of indulgence, and fear the rain of the sky. Ugh, what a load of garbage. I have no clue who had sent this text, but it was clearly someone attempting to take the dream pools away from me. I knew what they were talking about, referring to that land as Babylon and claiming that Nimrod was a man of evil. But it couldn't be true. Nobody so kind to me could be as evil as this text claimed. When a stranger warns you of a friend being dangerous, it is unwise to betray your trust in exchange for potential lies. I would not have that. Loneliness can kill a man, and man do I feel lonely. Whenever the skies let out not a drop of rain, if I fall into a state of pure misery, clawing at the ground and screaming to the heavens. It had been weeks since it last rained, and I began to get desperate. I needed the simple joy and bliss of hunting with a bow and chatting with my close companion. I'd nothing before, but now that I knew what it felt like to have something, I couldn't just go back to having nothing. No, I wouldn't have this. If God wasn't going to give me rain, I would make my own rain. I poured water onto the ground with a hose, slamming my fists into the puddle I had created. Why wouldn't this work, damn it? I needed to get back there. I need to get through this puddle, but it just won't work. I cried out as I slammed my fists into the water, doing nothing but soaking my shirt with the splashes of water and crunching my fists against the concrete sidewalk I'd poured the water onto. My neighbors fear me and call me a demon behind my back. I haven't caught them saying these things, but I know they do. I know for sure that they do. It's impossible that they don't. I see it in their eyes, their judgmental glares and malicious gazes. These bastards watch my agony and think nothing of it but the idea that I might be crazy. Oh, but if only they knew! If only they knew of the wonderful little fantasy land on the other ends of these murky puddles that open up with their maws and swallow me whole whenever the heavens bless me with rain. Oh, how wonderful it is. These wonderful dream pools, taking me to lands of the most pure happiness any man could ever desire. A good friend, a bow, an arrow, the great outdoors, and many quaint creatures to hunt the meat of. There is nothing more to life than the simple things that make you so very happy. There can be nothing greater than this, nothing at all. As I claw at the murky puddle of hose water on the ground, I feel eyes from some unhuman interloper on me, watch from all directions. This world isn't safe. I know this to be true. The demons of Babylon eye me from everywhere. I can't look and hold malevolent stares. Oh no. I have to get away. I have to get through the pool of thoughts and dreams. My mind is decaying. The creatures are encroaching upon my location fast. Their hand on my shoulder. The demon speaks, though is not a demon at all. Simply a neighbor. Not a demon. Not just my neighbor. Marionette? Watson, are you okay? You've been acting strange lately. She's trying to steal this from me. The dream pools are mine and mine alone. Nobody can take them from me. Back off. I'm fine, I snarl, continuing to pound my fists bloody against the sidewalk, terrified neighbors in all directions examining the scene. They could not begin to comprehend what lay beyond this ever-formidable barrier, blocking entry into Nimrod's splendid domain. They could not understand it. She stepped back in fear, looking to the onlookers, witnessing my madness, the degradation of my being. What I had become. A demon, hungry for the indulgence that could clear my haze. And I would have it. Rain! Rain! It rains once more! I rejoiced, watching as heaven's tears wet the earth, the angels sobbing their holy cries. The pools streaming from the skies opened up onto the earth, my glee reaching crescendo as my hand slipped through the sad, blue eyes of the angels of God. I let their gaze consume me, swallowed whole into the blissful abyss. Nimrod greeted me so cheerfully, and I greeted him back with boundless joy. This month has been so light on rain. I hadn't seen you in what felt like so long, I cried, Nimrod nodding with understanding. It is true, he began, that a man's worst poison is the emptiness of being alone. Nimrod folded his arms, looking to the bright sky, the sun gently lofting about it, and the clouds rolling through, darker structures in the sky threatening to pour down rain in the near future. He cleared his throat before speaking. I know a lot about loneliness. Nobody becomes as wise as I without having unhealthy amounts of time to himself. He sat me down on the side of a hill before continuing to speak. Not a lot of people, save for the historians and the most religious of man, have read the origins of my name. Any Abrahamic text should contain it. Nimrod, the architect of the Tower of Babel. Most people know the story of the tower, but not of the man who commissioned it. He paused for a moment before continuing. After mankind's languages had been split, humanity had found the others who spoke their language and left the tower of those they could communicate with. Except not one man was left speaking my language. It was punishment for that act against God, punishment exceeding that of what was given to the average worker, as it's most wise to punish the man behind it all, and nothing is more lonely than living in a world of people when not a single one of them can be communicated with. Not many people experience this type of loneliness, not literally at least, perhaps metaphorically, with the people around them simply not understanding them, unable to figure out who you truly are. It is such a distant feeling. I've never felt so understood, I grinned. My neighbors think I am crazy for being so obsessed with the rain and puddles, none of them understanding that paradise lies beyond the water. The feeling of being watched increased. Every time I was without that land, I felt chills. I couldn't trust even that the clouds of the sky weren't hiding some demon behind them, waiting to attack me once my back was turned. It was all so insidious, the corners of my eyes flooding with darting shadows and snickering devils, hungry for my teeth, perhaps. It wasn't just the real world that I felt suspicious of anymore, but Nimrod, too. There was something going on here, something deeper that I could not grasp. The demon of Babylon, the Tower of Babel. The connection is there, but what does it mean? What king's pact? Speaking without speaking? Like seeing but not with the eyes? What does it all mean? What could any of this mean? Surely I was going mad. That was the only logical explanation about it. I'd hit my head real hard when running from Marionette and simply hallucinated the whole entire ordeal. Or did I? The knife, it was real, and I still had it. I stabbed through my hand, feeling real pain and seeing real blood. This wasn't a hallucination. The real knife had to have come from a real place. This wasn't a work of my mind, but true, genuine pain and true, genuine blood. A text document was open up on my laptop. My laptop that had been facing the entire ordeal. Seeing without seeing. Got it. And the text doc had writing in it, in order to speak without speaking. As much as you wish this weren't real, you've uncovered an ancient and evil place, and one that will continue to haunt you. Every time it rains, you'd better stay indoors, as while the King's Pact simply binds us to not speak to you or witness you with our eyes, the pact placed upon the demon of Babylon is one of restriction to his own world, unable to even access this plane. It's all so overwhelming and confusing. There was no way that Nimrod was an evil man. He had been nothing but a saint to me. And well, the most logical thing to do at this given moment was to ask him directly. I was never good at communicating so outright, but you'd be a fool not to genuinely talk to someone in the name of companionship, and that's not something I'd do. Well, not now, at least. And so, I had returned to the land where Nimrod lived once more, through one of those puddles summoned by hard rains. I interrupted Nimrod's greetings by directly asking my question. What is the King's Pact? It felt as if the birds of the forest all went silent at once, with not even the wind in the leaves of the trees making a sound. He laughed. "The King's Pact?" Nimrod asked, looking to me with madness in his eyes. Yes, I need an explanation. I have been feeling unwell about this place recently, and need you to put these thoughts to rest, I explained, fear creeping her dark fingers through the folds of my mind. The King's Pact was a binding created to restrict me, and it is the source of my loneliness. Solomon called me the demon of Babylon, and placed upon me an ancient seal, preventing me from speaking to the humans of Earth with my lips, and preventing me from seeing the Earth with my eyes, he exclaimed. But I don't need to see Earth with my eyes, nor do I need to speak there. It is enough to let the fools come to me, into my domain, where the seal cannot apply. I took a step back, gasping and confused. Why did Solomon use that seal on you? I interrogated. Because he believed that simply not allowing me to tell people to enter the puddles would prevent people from finding them. The eyes of the sky stared down upon me. Wait. Why hadn't I questioned this before? The night sky here is made of eyes. Night skies are supposed to be made of stars. Nimrod laughed in a wicked, raspy manner before speaking to me once more. I suppose the redefining of my name to be that of a fool was a fitting punishment, considering the foolish endeavor of my past that God struck down, though a constant reminder of certain unfinished business that I intend to complete. From the ground erupted a monolith of writhing limbs and eyes, blackened and charred and twisted into the thousands of windows of a tower, spiraling up into an overwhelming bright fracture in the sky. Nimrod outstretched his arms as if to add emphasis to his horrific creation, beaming with pride and joy at the horrible mass of bodies transfigured and melded together into the pinnacle of mankind's hubris, the very tower that gave birth to the countless languages of man. I stammered, Unable to comprehend the sight of suffering that stood before me, the tower itself seemed to sway and scream as the thousands of people twisted into its form begged for salvation. Nimrod simply smiled. "Are you ready to help me complete it?" I took a step back in horror. He was asking me to help him? To construct this obelisk of eternal torment? This monolith of fear? "What's wrong, my friend? Are we not close companions?" Nimrod asked, seemingly showing genuine pain at my horrified reaction to his tower. I finally managed to get out a couple of words, simply asking, "What is this?" Nimrod gleefully replied, "What you are looking at is the Tower of Babel, originally constructed of stone with intentions of reaching heaven. It has now been reborn into this new world with a new resource." The word resource sickened me. How it simply had no place in such a context and how deliberately chosen it felt. "In remembrance of the punishment God bestowed upon us for the construction of such a thing, the tower speaks in all the tongues of the world." The tower replied to Nimrod's insanity with harrowing cries and sobs. Arms uselessly attempted to free the rest of their bodies from the tower, with no hope of escape, as the bodies had been fused together into one large, hulking mass of pure flesh and bone. "I refuse to help you with such an evil thing," I cried out, finally steadying myself and pushing out the thoughts about the horrible fate of the people of the tower. Nimrod shook his head and clicked his tongue. Too scared to ask for the hand of a woman, but bold enough to challenge the man who placed every last body of this tower. He lunged forth, and I only barely managed to jump to the side before his fists hit the ground, shattering stone and kicking up torrents of dirt. Nimrod laughed. "You were one of the only people I've ever felt a deep connection to, a true friendship. It's a shame that even you, of all people, are a disloyal traitor." He wound up for a punch, and hit me in my stomach hard enough to send me flying into a tree. "I suppose you'll have to join the rest of the tower as my newest brick." I doubled over, coughing up blood. Couldn't see any way out of this. Nimrod was going to break my bones and weld me onto the tower as one more brick in a sea of 1,000 screams. Until, for the first time since I'd been here, it began to rain. It was just a few drops at first, but then more and more began to fall from the sky. It wasn't just rain, but thunder too. Lightning struck at the Tower of Babel, causing them to scream out in horrible pain as the flesh near the top changed to a crisp black, the mouths of that region shutting up for good. I crawled towards a puddle that had formed nearby, desperate to escape Nimrod and his horrible plan. "If you leave my land, I shall simply wait for another to come to me. You are one of many." If I left, he would just find new bodies to add to the overwhelming mass. It would not stop him if I simply left. He would complete his tower regardless. Only the Lord above knows what horrifying purpose such a monolithic structure could hold. It was not enough to leave. I had to kill the Tower of Babel. "You can't hide forever. You're a slow, clunky man, and you're up against the greatest hunter the world has ever known," boasted Nimrod, as he stomped through the jungle, pushing aside branches and ripping up the underbrush in search of me. And then he stopped moving. The only sound that remained was the pouring of rain and his ragged breaths. I began to sync my breaths to the sounds of thunder, to ensure that I made not one distinguishable sound. I could hear him sniffing the air, perhaps smelling my fear. He began to move towards my location, loudly crinkling the leaves and foliage beneath his feet, and making sure to snap each twig he noticed. It didn't matter that he was loud, as I had no way to run. He was faster than me, and with more stamina. At this point, He was only doing this to toy with me in my final moments. He looked over the foliage I hid in, sniffing the air. He knew where I was, no doubt about it. He simply chose to extend this torment to heighten the thrill of the hunt. Unfortunately for Nimrod, I still had the knife he'd given me earlier, and with a swift stab I'd returned it, not into his hand, but into his bare foot. He recoiled in pain, falling back only for the blade to further slice all the way through his toes. I was able to grab the knife once more and sprinted towards the tower, still hobbling in agony from the previous punch I'd taken from Nimrod. One slide down a mucky hillside later, and I'd arrived at the base of the Tower of Babel. The door was made from bodies just like the rest of the tower, with large circular handles formed from arms twisted together. I could try stabbing them one at a time, but I would never kill all of them before Nimrod enacted upon me any number of horrible murders. But there was one thing I could do. I slipped between the doors of the tower and closed them without a sound. I only hoped Nimrod wouldn't suspect that I'd gone within. With the knife, I began to carve away at the flesh of the tower, disconnecting the meat of it from the rocky foundation. I had a lot of work cut out for me, with not much time to do it, but I was determined to destroy the Tower of Babel and end the suffering of the humans that formed it. Nimrod began to slam his fists on the door, pounding in rage as he'd realized I'd gone inside. The door refused to budge, though, and the bodies interlocked arms so that it could not open. "Do you think you can hide from me forever, Ulysses? Eventually you will want to go home, and you'll be forced to get through me to find one of the puddles." I tuned out his threats, focusing on my task as I continued cutting away at the flesh at the base of the tower. Even as I sliced through their skin, the faces melded into the walls, thanked me, and used the strength they had to help push my blade through the meat. The arms pushed me faster and faster, beginning to simply rip apart the skin rather than cleanly slicing it. But it did not matter, for the job was almost done. All that remained was to cut down the part closest to the door. As the blade pushed through the flesh around the front of the Tower of Babel, Nimrod's banging and yelling went silent. He understood with perfect clarity exactly what was about to occur. The Tower of Babel was a massive structure, so large that if it weren't for the arms of the people of its walls accelerating my blade and pushing it through their own flesh, it might have taken days to cut through its entire circumference. So it was no surprise that when it began to rapidly collapse downward towards Nimrod, he chose not to run away. The door had torn off its hinges as the tower collapsed forward onto Nimrod, the bodies of it seemingly pushing in that direction deliberately, allowing me one last look at the face of the so-called Demon of Babylon. And his face was not one of malice, but one of acceptance. He knew that this would be his end, and that this tower was going to crush him. He chose not to engage in some futile final struggle to avoid his death. He simply accepted his end with grace. And with a final wet thud, the tower had fully collapsed. The bodies that had not been immediately transformed into a paste by the energy of the fall put smiles on their faces as they accepted a slow death of bleeding out or dying of shock from internal injuries. Such a fate would seem gruesome to the average person, but for someone whose life was rendered into an eternal torment, this was the greatest mercy one could bestow upon them. And for the first time, the Tower of Babel fell silent, to never make another sound again. I stood outside the diner Marionette was employed at, holding in my hands a bouquet of flowers. Upon walking out, she was shocked to see me, especially in such a put-together state after what a wreck she'd last seen me as. "I tried calling you, but you just wouldn't pick up. I thought you'd gone and done something horrible," she cried. "Oh, sorry about all that. I simply, hadn't gotten enough sleep in a while. Sleep deprivation makes you do crazy things," I began, letting out a nervous chuckle. "Anyways, I feel like it's finally time to confess how I feel about you." Her face lit up a lovely pink shade as she stared into my eyes in anticipation. And when I confessed my love for her, it was met with reciprocation. She'd loved me from the very beginning, but I was too afraid to ask. And everything I was scared of was simply a delusion in my head. It's a good thing someone gave me something real to be afraid of. He wasn't lying when he told me that he would help me become brave. Thank you, King Nimrod.